Hey, welcome back, folks. I should say welcome back, Gino, because, of course, I've been off in the hinterlands working in my Re-elect Trump group. And we're back here on Left Right. My
Re-elect Trump group.
Tom McLaughlin from Lovell, Maine. Gino Funicella from Jackson,
Accent first syllable, Lovell.
And Lovell. You got to love Lovell. If you can find your way out of there, let me know. I've been lost there on many occasions.
Have you?
And a little bit bad. Hey, but anyway, getting back to the game at hand. Tom, we have a question here from top management. Here we are, by the way, the middle of August. I mean, you realize in 2 more weeks we could be looking at snowflakes.
2 more weeks?
2 more weeks, of course. September. I've seen the snow here in September.
I don't think I have.
Oh, I can't read this. Oh, wait a minute. It's upside down. Okay. I'm sure you'll have thoughts on this, too. This is a good question. What are your thoughts on the Trump's administration's plan to establish a 6th branch of the U.S. military, provisionally called the Space Force?
Well,
Let me figure
administratively, I don't know. I don't think I have a problem with it. I mean, we have both the Air Force, an Army. I think, are the ICBMs controlled by the Army, or is it the Air Force?
I think they all have their own.
Well, ICBM,
The Navy
intercontinental ballistic missile goes
Right.
up into space and travels most of the distance to the target through
Absolutely.
space,
It's
then
out of our
re-enters the
atmosphere.
atmosphere. So it is a space weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And we have satellites, which are a big part of our warfighting effort, and those are space-based. So it would seem, other countries, China, are going big into space. They can.
Yeah, but they're not military, I don't think.
Well, they do. I think this is in response to what China is doing, and we can't know all of what China is doing. We can't even know all of what we're doing because so much of that stuff is classified. So it comes down to a matter of, well, if General Mattis believes that this is what we need, and I think he does, then I tend to trust his judgment on things. He's the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, well,
And
I have to say, I think it's a terrible idea because I go back to Ronald Reagan with Star Wars. Ronald Reagan wanted to have a Star Wars scenario where you could launch nuclear missiles from out in outer space and et cetera, to knock out your opponents and whatnot. And what happened at the time, it was discussed in great depth at the time. It was found that it's a first strike weapon. If you control, well, think about it. You shrug your head. At the time, it was called, basically not by us, but by our Russian adversaries, communists at the time. No longer communists, of course. They now believe in God.
yeah.
They're now Christian believers. At the time, it was going to start another nuclear race, and it may have been the reason why Russia backed out of the race because they couldn't
The
afford
Soviet
it.
Union.
Soviet Union, at the time, Soviet Union. They backed out of the space race because they couldn't afford Star Wars.
They collapsed.
It collapsed. It collapsed from financial, trying to keep up with us basically with our own military.
Yes.
Right now we spend $750 billion every year on the military.
No.
It's the money we
are
know,
this year.
Yeah,
The current
okay.
budget is $750
we're going to
billion.
make us the biggest, strongest military in the world. We actually have more weapons than the other top 20 countries in the world combined. That's how much of a military. And what we're going to do is, now we're going to move it into outer space, which of course
Did you say we have 20 times more
20,
than the
we have more
cumulative?
than all the accumulated military in all the other powerful countries. We have more military.
We
spend
do
more.
have, I agree, we have more, but
We
not
spend
20
more.
times more.
No, we spend more than all 20 combined. Okay.
We do spend more
Yes.
than that. Yes,
okay.
I understand that.
So here we are,
that's
leading
very
the
true.
race to oblivion. That no, we're not going to. Now, what could that extra, however many billion, this space race is going to cost us? We'll always be number one. But remember this. What you have to do is look back once in your lifetime and watch a movie called Dr. Strangelove,
I've seen it.
How I Learned to Not Worry About the Bomb. Watch
I
that
remember
movie, and all
Peter
you people
Sellers,
should
yeah.
watch it, and you will see where we are and where we're going. And My advice is, please don't do it. We have enough problems. Please, let's keep space unmilitarized, and because we never know what's going to happen. We have a bigger problem right now with all the computers that can interface with all our computers in this cosmic world where they can actually change your votes. That's a bigger problem than space, believe me. But anyway, that's my opinion. And why don't do you want to lead off with
I want to react to what you said.
Okay, you can.
I think
That may cause a positive reaction, I'll say.
there was a report by the Pentagon just about a year, not quite 2 years ago, maybe some, that on the readiness of our military. And our B-1 bomber fleet could not fly half of the planes in the fleet because they were down for repair. They didn't have spare parts. They were taking spare parts from existing planes to keep a certain amount of them flying, and the same was true for many of our fighter planes, many of our tanks. Our Navy was down to we had a 400-ship Navy at one point. That was the highest point. We were down to fewer than 200, and now it is true that each of the ones, say, built at Bath Iron Works, some of those destroyers, their capability makes
More than all we had in all
well, they're worth multiple ships of the previous design. So yeah, I understand that, but still, we just don't have a functional, and plus we had, how many collisions were there of
That happened in
naval
the
vessels
Trump watch.
within the last year
Yeah.
that were, I mean, they don't know how to drive the ships.
I think there were 3 or 4, yeah.
So and that has to do with training, and standards have relaxed. So all those things indicate that we have not got a very effective military, and so I do agree that we need to beef it up. And if you have a strong military, then you're less likely to need to use it. And if you want peace, prepare for war. I believe that is a great rule of thumb. But President Obama, he did not replenish the military, didn't budget enough. And it had to do not only with his decisions, but it had to do with the budgetary agreement. I forget the name, what they called it. You know, okay, we're going to cut both defense spending and domestic spending incommensurately, because we can't reach a budget agreement. Because we weren't even budgeting. We were doing continuing resolutions and all that mess. Well, now we're budgeting again, which is great.
And they're not shutting down the government because Obama was in office. They were trying to do every time he tried to do something, they started talking about shutting down the government.
Well,
right?
we may be doing that again. Then that's
Well, that's
President
because
Trump over the wall.
Trump himself would want it. No, he says he wants. He don't really want it. But anyway, here's the
So
thing.
no,
though.
I believe that the military spending is needed. This boost in military spending up to $750 billion that you mentioned.
God.
But mostly what I worry about, but most people are under the impression that the military is the biggest part of our budget. And especially, I can't tell you how many Democrats believe that. They say most of our spending goes into military. It isn't. It's exactly it's a minority. We have a $3.5 trillion budget, and as you just said, 750, I think it's about 780
just
billion
roughly. It may- that
is
may
the
be-
military budget.
Yeah, but
Okay,
there's hidden
so
stuff,
that's
too.
way few, that's only like a
Chicken
quarter
feed.
of it. So.
But
it's
here's the
less
thing,
than-
Tom. I understand where you come from. I understand we have to be strong, peace to strength and all that. I understand that. But look around and see who our adversaries are.
Yeah.
Our adversaries are Iran, basically horse and buggy type place.
Iran? Are you kidding?
Iran, they get nothing. They get nothing. But anyway,
Got nothing.
during the war,
I won't interrupt.
look at during the war with Iraq, they sent 1 million men into Iraq over the deserts and all that, and they lost 1 million people. Iran, okay?
that's right, yeah.
So they lost a whole generation in that war.
Yeah.
They don't really want war. As a group of people, I'm not saying the Ayatollahs, I'm not saying them. I'm saying as a group of people, they don't like war because they lost a lot of family, okay? So they don't like it. Russia is a shell of its former self, the same, a lower GDP than Italy. And I keep saying that, but it's true. They cannot fight a conventional war. They get their ass kicked in Georgia, they got their ass kicked in Afghanistan, and they got their ass kicked in Ukraine. They're not in there running the country. They did what they thought they could do, and they're getting their ass kicked in Syria. We kicked the hell out of one group of their people over there a month or two ago. But here's the point. So there you got Russia's got nothing, and they got Putin. He's a madman.
They got
China?
nothing. Wait a minute. They got nothing.
China's
Excuse me.
dealing-
They got ICBMs with
They can
nuclear weapon
okay, they
warheads.
can end the world. I understand that. China's got basically a philosophy. 1,000 years from now, they know they're still going to be there. They're still going to be ahead because they're not stupid. They don't spend. They spend, I think it's 10% as much as we do on their military system. So who else is there in the world? Japan? North Korea? North Korea's got, our biggest threat is ICBMs. It's not land armies anymore. These people were thinking of it, we can spend all this money. And one other quick thing about the B-1 bomber. We have been flying B-1 bombers from Kansas to bomb Syria and Iraq. Do you know that?
Mm-hmm.
A 24-hour flight, round trip, all right?
Refueled in flight.
Now, you would think that, boy, somebody with a brain could really think of an easier way to bomb Iraq or Iran. Oh, no. We're going to fly from Kansas. We still have a fleet of B-52 bombers that fly about 600 miles an hour and get shot down with a beam blower, and we're still flying them. All I'm saying about this $750 billion or whatever it might be, and I think there's another $250 billion in there somewhere hiding, black ops and that kind of stuff. Think about it. We're spending all this kind of money, and we're not winning any wars with them. Are we winning? Huh?
I'm going to disagree with you when it comes
as
to. We do
usual.
have the biggest threat is ICBMs and submarines, which Russia has, which China has, and those are nuclear weapons are our biggest.
Of course they are.
But there's also biological weapons and chemical weapons, who
Yep.
are also a major threat. But the biggest threat, I think now, the emerging threat that we need to have a flexible military has to do with what they call non-traditional warfare, that is terrorism, and infiltrating of terror squads to do damage,
of course.
and the kind of stuff that Hezbollah does, for example. Hezbollah is a huge force both in Syria and in Lebanon. They control Lebanon now, Hezbollah. And they are puppets of Iran. And when you say, you downplay Iran's military effectiveness, they are very effective. They are the strong. Well, Turkey's probably the strongest military in the Middle East, but Iran would be second. And,
Well, there isn't much
and
there.
gaining.
You're wrong, though, because Saudi Arabia is about the fourth largest military in the world, fourth or fifth. Largest. They fly all our planes.
Not an army, but in their air capability.
Exactly.
Yes,
They've got a fourth or fifth largest
that's not all of
expenditures.
it. Air power. is not all.
Here's the thing. I'll give you something that'll twist your Twitter a little bit here. You know how we're supposed to be fighting ISIS? Now, when you say after 17 years trying to help Afghanistan off its butts, that we kind of like owed a little bit in Afghanistan, we should be, I would think. Owed. We've
I don't understand. What are you talking
We're trying to
about?
get the Taliban out of there. We're trying to get the government that's in place.
Who owes us?
Afghanistan, the leadership in Afghanistan. What do you think the Afghanistanis are doing right now for ISIS? Do you know about...
What are they doing for
Yeah,
ISIS?
for ISIS.
You mean the Afghan government that is
Yeah.
allied to
Yeah,
us?
our
Are
buddies,
they doing
our
for
pals,
ISIS?
Our pals, so we train how to
There's
kill people. You
There are some ISIS contingents in Afghanistan.
know how many? They gave themselves up. Around 300 of them are being held.
So what's your point?
The point is, you have... you like the way this government's going, okay? Why don't you call somebody in Washington and tell them these ISIS that have been captured or given themselves up to the Afghani army should be turned over to the United States for trial because they were killing American people. They left them with their cell phones.
Wait a second. We're at war with ISIS. Now you want to have them on trial in a civilian court?
I'd like to put them on trial for what
In a
they've
civilian
done.
court?
Military court in Afghanistan that we can control.
Okay.
But they're offering them help.
I
aid
won't
and
be
comfort.
against that.
Aid and comfort.
All right, Gino.
don't like
Over
that.
breakfast, we were talking about Afghanistan. There was an American soldier killed there, and his coffin got brought back a day or two ago. And
Yeah.
and to see Americans continue to die there, in addition to the 1,500 or so that have died there already.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an accurate number, but it's up somewhere in that range.
Between Iraq and Afghanistan, it's 7,000 altogether.
Yeah.
5 and 2.
And I think I don't think we should continue with this war in Afghanistan. It's the longest war we've ever fought, and I don't see there is a scenario for winning it, and it doesn't seem as though there is a will to win it. And it doesn't even seem as though we could even define winning.
We don't know what winning is.
Exactly. So I think, as a rule of thumb, with American, when you deploy American forces, there should, one, be a will to win as quickly and as possible.
Expeditious.
That is, shock and awe, kick butt, all out, win.
Get the hell.
And then, in order to do that, you got to define what winning is. Here is our objective. Now, the last time that happened would have been George H.W. Bush against Saddam Hussein in Kuwait. Right. Now, as I look back on that, I see that as a brilliant campaign. And we had overwhelming force. It was over militarily in a matter of weeks or less, and then we got the heck out. And that is the way to do it.
We also had a bunch of allies that helped out in that, too.
We did, but it was mostly us.
I'm finding them now.
Well, they're helping us in Afghanistan, too, but I just think it's a waste. Now, what about all the American lives that have been given up there and will be given up for nothing? Well, I think that's true already. It's just that we haven't acknowledged it. I think it's for nothing. That's where Osama bin Laden deployed from in the September 11th attacks, and that was the impetus for going in there. But we're not going to straighten out Afghanistan. Afghanistan will never be straightened out. The British learned that, the Russians learned that, and now we're learning it the hard way. It's time to just stop.
Well, that's the problem. The problem with building a huge military is you'll always have generals and military people that want to practice. Now, practice might be sparring. It's like a sparring. Well, these are sparring partners compared to our military. We were in Iraq. We had Abrams tanks that could sit 7 miles away and hit Iraqi tanks over the horizon. They didn't even know what in the hell hit them.
I agree.
Okay? So we're fighting these people.
And it's a desert, and it's flat, and air power was overwhelming, and so.
Unbelievable.
But Afghanistan's a different kettle of fish.
Afghanistan is a place that's been under siege for 1,000 years.
And it's mountainous.
You have to, one of the things I advise, if anybody in here can get the last 2 weeks online of the Roto section, the American section of the New York Times, read this thing about what we're doing in Afghanistan. It'll just turn your hair gray, white, pink, whatever. It is unbelievable. We're fighting a mountain battle over there with kids that were not even born when the World Trade Center was bombed. And it's sad, 17 years. This is going to be like the War of the Roses. This is like the 30 Years' War. Do you realize that?
Are we ready to move on?
I wanted to talk a little bit about Alex Jones, who has recently, of him, he's online, he's got all these different sites, and he's a conspiracy theorist, and he has all these sites, and he thought the thing in Connecticut with the murder of all those
Newtown, Connecticut shootings.
Newtown, Connecticut, 26 people killed. He's been talking about it's a farce, it never happened. And what happens is some of the people online with Alex Jones that follow him like lambs to a slaughter, they believe what he says, and so they pick up the name. This is actually true, folks. I can't believe this.
Right.
These freaks that follow Alex Jones get the information on the parents who lost their children. And then what they do is they harass them on the web, and they threaten them in their homes. One person has moved like 5 times since it happened because little partners there, but they're insane.
Experiencing technical difficulties.
Yeah, we were saying, but he says all Democrats are fascists. Now, I know a lot of Democrats are different things, but most of them I know aren't fascists. He's been kicked off of a lot of sites now. They won't even let him on anymore because of some of the stuff he says. It's sort of like, lighting a fire in the middle of a theater, shouting fire in a theater that's loaded with people. He's just something. This guy, do you know anything about him?
I've heard him in clips, and he yells a lot.
Oh,
So,
God.
and I heard about the Newtown, Connecticut thing, that he believed that it was a conspiracy by the government. And can't imagine what, even if you granted him that, okay, if it was a conspiracy, by whom, to do what? What was the purpose of the conspiracy? I mean, that I don't know.
He says it never happened.
So that tells me the guy's nuts. All
Something
right?
wrong with
At least on that issue.
But you know,
I have seen, I have gone to his site only because he's linked on the Drudge Report. And
Yeah.
I won't know that it's his site until the
hear it.
link will have a short line
Yeah.
and say, I'll click on it, and then I go to InfoWars, is the name of his site. And sometimes I read things on there that are coherent, and he clearly has a conservative, he's clearly right of center, pretty far out there. But once in a while, you'll find something newsworthy on there, and fairly well researched and reliable. But I can't trust the site because of what you opened
Yeah.
with, which is, anyone that believes that Newtown was a conspiracy, I can't. That's poor judgment. So if he's in control of other stories on the site, it looks like he is, then that's going to be highly questionable.
I think
in my mind. But you brought up something else, that he is losing. Like, I think he's kicked off of Facebook and
He's
Twitter
off a number
and a couple of
Might
other
still be on
platforms.
Twitter,
I
but I'm
can't
not
remember
sure, yeah.
which ones they are.
yeah.
But that I say, okay, you kick them off, well, because it's fake news or whatever. But they keep on people like Minister Farrakhan and Al Sharpton and people like that, and. Okay, so if those guys are out there on the other side of the spectrum, right? Now, you're going to keep them, then you got to keep Alex Jones too. All of them are questionable.
Well, the
all of
problem
them
is
are
what's happening
extremists.
because
I'd say
of the fellow.
Farrakhan is more far out to the
he's
left
out.
than Jones is to the right. But they're both flakes. They're both dangerous.
I think
in
it's the
that
difference
sense.
is what they're talking. If you're talking to a person who's, like, I have friends that lived in Newtown, Connecticut, and my neighbors, and their kids were going to grandkids were going to another school. So they weren't affected by that, but they know a lot of people that lost their
You
children.
don't have to say to me that.
I know what I'm saying is I don't know what Farrakhan talks about. I hate him. I haven't liked him.
Well, he's an anti-Semite. He hates
I
white
can't
people.
st- I
He
can't stand the
believes
man.
all white people are
He's
devils.
a phony,
He believes
phony
he's crazy.
weasel,
He's crazy.
dancer from Roxbury.
Homosexuals,
And Al,
he's a nut.
Sharpton, that's the Reverend Al, right? I can't.
The allegedly Reverend
He's got a
Al.
very small head on a body. I don't like him, but not because of that. But I don't like him. But
Good.
I've always said I didn't like him, so it's consistent. I go back to Tawana Brawley. I didn't like him when he did that about the girl in the plastic bag covered with excrement. Okay, so I
But
mean,
he still gets coverage. And he had his own show on MSNBC for years.
Yeah, I know. I don't like him. But the thing is, I don't think he's at the point that Alex Jones is. I mean, and then what happens is he has a lot of power, this guy, and there's a lot of sick people out there.
Who has a lot of power?
Alex Jones, with a certain group of people. And these people react.
They all do. They all have their little
Yeah, but who goes
constituencies.
after someone's home?
So does the people that believe in UFOs. They have their constituencies as well. So I mean, so
yeah,
what?
but I mean, that doesn't hurt anybody, does it? Because they believe in UFOs?
Well, what?
That doesn't cause people to call the house and say, we're going to burn your house down.
Well, how has Alex Jones hurt people?
Well, because his people, his disciples, when they get this information, he said they believe it. It's like the guy that believed that Hillary Clinton was cutting up bodies in a pizza parlor in New Jersey in one of the fruitcakes because they
Was that him? Was that Alex Jones?
Yeah, they went out and they shot up the pizza parlor thinking that Hillary Clinton was in there cutting up bodies. I mean, you can think a lot
Really?
of
They
that.
shot up a pizza parlor?
They shot and the guy got arrested. Didn't kill anybody, but the thing is, it's like waving a red flag in front of a bull with some of these
Here's
people.
another one.
Go ahead.
You got, for example, the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now,
Yeah.
that's an organization that's way out to the left.
Yeah, they are.
And they get a lot, mainstream media, folk believes what they have to say and believes in
Yeah.
their analysis and say
Yeah.
these people are racist or these people are Islamophobic or whatever it is. And they lost a big lawsuit. I think it was a $20 million lawsuit
Really?
to this outfit in the UK that, you know, sued them and
Yeah.
said, you know, you said I was Islamophobic, or if you called me, you know, anti-Muslim hate group, or
Oh,
something
yeah, I
like
heard
that,
about
right?
that. Yeah.
Well, they weren't anything. They were anything but that. I mean,
Yeah.
they were Muslims themselves,
Yeah.
and anyway. So they had to pay, and so
Yeah.
that was the first official dent
Chink
in
the
their
armor.
credibility. But their credibility is shot. I mean, I know people who have been called haters on the SPLC. A guy from Maine, that he's no way he's a hater. And
Well,
it's
what
just,
they gotta do is wait until, I mean, you know, you need.
so that group has a huge platform, is
Yeah.
my point. And they are just as unreliable as Alex Jones is, but yet they get a lot of attention. Antifa, they also, these platforms that are kicking Alex Jones off have all these other people on the other side
See, I haven't
that
watched
they
any of
don't
this,
kick off.
Yeah, I
So
haven't seen
that,
any of that.
you know, they're private and they can do what they want.
Yeah.
Facebook is privately owned. All these platforms are privately owned, so it's not government.
Yeah.
And they can do, so they're not really violating the First Amendment as
Well, they
such.
used to do that
They
years
can't be
ago.
sued under that. But they are certainly violating the spirit of it, and they're inconsistent, and they have a lot of power. They have a huge amount of power.
Well, I think what you have to look at is the results of the transgression. If someone like Alex Jones is on this web talking to people who are whatever, I don't know if they're racist or just haters or what they are, but if he's talking, not all of them, but a number of them, and they see this and they react to it in a negative way by attacking people that he talks about, that's dangerous.
Okay.
I haven't heard the same thing about.
Let's talk about Antifa. Over the weekend, we had this group that was called like Unite the Right or something, and they had a rally in Washington, D.C.
like
called
20
Unite
people.
the Right 2, you know, 2.
That's after the one in Virginia last year, wasn't it? Was that what it
And
was? Yeah.
they were tried to be, I think, in Virginia or North Carolina, and they were not allowed to get a permit to have a demonstration. So they had, in Washington, D.C., they
Right.
did get one, and only 30 guys showed up.
I know, it was
right?
a joke.
It was, but yet, who else, but the media far outnumbered the 30 guys that were
More
there.
cameramen than people.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and they preempted regular programming over the weekend to focus on these
I know,
30
it's ridiculous.
nutcases.
Ridiculous.
Okay, meanwhile, you had thousands of counter demonstrators,
Well, there were some
mostly
people that were just there demonstrating.
mostly Antifa, some of them Black Lives Matter, and media hardly covered them. And there was no violence on the part of the nutcase, Unite the Right ones, but there was plenty of violence on the part
There were
of
more cops than
Antifa.
people.
There was, what they did was, they assaulted a CBS guy, gave him 4 stitches in the back of the head and a concussion,
Yeah.
right? That was mentioned briefly on CBS. NBC had their cameras were damaged. They were assaulted
This is by Antifa?
by Antifa.
Yeah.
The mainstream media said, well, there was a little bit of unrest by the anti-hate groups,
The anti-fascists,
That's
that's what Antifa means,
but
right?
they called
Anti-fascists.
them anti-hate. They didn't
Oh,
call
I see
them
what you're saying, yeah.
Antifa.
Yeah.
So they were saying, and then one guy on CNN said, well, they're in the right, so it's okay. All punches are not equal, was the phrase that
Oh,
he
that's
used,
foolishness.
meaning that
Yeah.
if
That's
they
stupid.
punch somebody, it's okay, but if somebody punches them, it's not, because
That's
all
stupid.
punches are not equal.
Yeah.
Nobody punched them. They did all the violence.
Yeah.
They also beat the heck out of a cop. I watched that
Really?
on film. And what surprised me the most about that,
The other cops watched?
exactly.
Wow. I didn't see it.
Sometimes they pulled the demonstrators off, and they're masked.
Yeah,
Okay,
what's that?
so
See, I didn't know what that was all
Why
about.
do they allow anybody that's masked? I would,
Wait, no,
they
why?
should
They
say,
get
if you
fired.
want to if they don't, they know they're on film and they're doing illegal stuff, and that's why they're masked, so they can't later be arrested.
What? Yeah.
So it's pretty clear that that's why they're masked, and they even say so on their own site. And they also carry weapons. Now, so far it's not guns, but it looks like they're escalating to guns. For example, oh gosh, I didn't put it on there. it was something like bullets against fascists next time, bullets to bash fascists.
Nice.
So now no, they didn't do it, there weren't any shots fired at this one, but it looks like that's where they're going.
Yeah.
So then they were chanting, no borders, no wall, no USA at all.
So
They also had many banners asking for revolution, bring down the government,
yeah, sort of like the weatherman or something.
kill Trump, etc.
Well,
Not good. Now they call themselves anti-fascists. They say
They
that
probably
these 30
are.
nutcases are fascists, and maybe they are fascists,
Yeah.
the 30 nutcases. But the thousands of Antifa are far more fascist than the 30 guys
See,
that
I
they're
find that,
demonstrating
yeah, I
against.
find what
That
they're doing-
disturbs me.
I find what they're doing is a mistake, because you don't fight the kind of violence that the KKK types deliver on a site by fighting with them. That's a mistake.
Okay.
The best way to fight them is don't even show up. Let them march with their black armbands and their Nazi slogans and their swastikas. Don't go. Let them march. Let them walk the way they did in Skokie, Illinois, years ago. All the Jews in Skokie come out and they were throwing stones at them. Everything.
I agree.
It gives it a very bad. It gives it a very bad look. So now
Yeah.
you got this group. There were a lot of normal, I would say, normal people there that were marching that really probably feel that what happened in Virginia last year was really bad. That a girl got run over, et cetera, and the president come out and said, well, there was equal problems on both sides. Once you can say that both sides were bad, then you lose the argument. The argument
Well,
is
that's
lost.
what Trump said after
He did. He said
Charlottesville.
both sides were bad. Now, that's because here you've got Nazi lookalikes.
Why do you lose the argument?
We lose that side of the argument, the good side. When you're seen as throwing bricks and bottles at a group as offensive as they are, it gives someone like a Trump to say both sides were bad.
Well,
When we all realize that, yeah, you can say I'm bad because I got mad at him. He's wearing a KKK sheet and he wants to hang blacks. This other one's wearing a Nazi uniform, which should actually be illegal. And yeah, I got mad, so I threw a stone. That makes me wrong too. Makes me wrong.
It
Because
does.
am I afraid of them? Because they can march? Let them march.
I agree with you when you say they're better off to just let them alone, to
Let
make
'em
fools
alone.
out of
Let 'em
themselves,
alone.
and
You
people
make
will
a fool out of
recognize them.
yourself.
They do.
But
All right.
anyway, we got to talk about some other stuff. We got to talk about some of the stuff about the tariffs.
Make your case.
Donald Trump appears to be thinking he's striking back against the awful tariffs that are imposed by all of the countries around the world as we impose our tariffs. The problem is, in a way, the international economy has been fluid for years, where you've had your pacts and agreements, and maybe they're getting a little more for strawberries than you are, maybe they're charging more tax on a Mercedes, et cetera, et cetera.
Fluid.
It's been fluid, even though maybe the numbers are not 100% positive for us. We were breaking even we're making money with Canada, making money with Mexico, losing a lot of money with China, which has always happened. So what does he do? He's targeted a lot of the countries where had a positive flow with, instead of targeting maybe China. Now China is reacting to some of the things he's done to us, they've done to him. What we have now is, I was looking at some economic people recently and reading some stuff about it, and it looks like right now we've got somewhere around a 3% GDP, which is pretty damn good. Anybody with any knowledge would say
A
that.
consistent 3%.
Consistent 3% this year. There are reasons for it. What they're saying, what I hear, and this isn't from Democrat or this, it's everybody. Next year is going to be problematic. Next year is problematic because this year the United States said with the tax bill, here, upper 1% mainly, here's $1 trillion. Do what you want with it. We'd like you to give some to your employees. Employee income has gone up this year pennies. It's like 2.4% increase, whereas last year was 2.2, something like that. Cost of living has gone up that same level. So that's kind of a break right there. Gasoline has gone up in the last year about 80 cents a gallon. So
Well, what does this have to do with tariffs? You said you
it
were
has a
going to
lot
make a
to
case
do with
about
tariffs
tariffs.
because he's instituting these tariffs, and the other countries like Turkey now is fighting back, and China is fighting back, and Mexico, and it's going to screw up a lot of income this into next year. And what the predictions are by the economists, they're going to be down below 2% growth. They say 1.8, 1.7% growth, which is no good for us. So I think what's happening is somebody's got to slow them down, because it always was that the Congress had the right, the purse. The Congress had the purse in this country. He, Trump, is directly affecting our ability to have a reasonable cash flow over the next few years. Meantime, I know you're looking at me with a checkered look there, but I'm serious. We are in for some real trouble, probably beginning sometime next year, and I don't think he can handle it.
All right, let me respond.
Go ahead. I know you've got something to say.
The EU, has been using tariffs against the United States to a far greater degree than we have taxed our imports from them.
Don't know.
And it's an outgrowth of the Marshall Plan. It's been going on that long.
I
In other
believe
words,
it. Probably sure.
It has.
After the war,
And we thought, okay, well, Marshall Plan was to rebuild their economy so that they wouldn't be vulnerable to communist
Yeah.
agitation and so forth, and that was successful.
Sure.
Okay, well then they turned into welfare states, many of the European countries, and started expending huge amounts of money for the welfare
Social
programs.
programs,
Yes, and they neglected their military, and they got down below the 2% that they had agreed upon as members of NATO.
Yeah.
But they continued to tax our imports much higher than we tax theirs. So there's an imbalance there. Clearly, their economies have recovered fully from World War
I
II
would say so.
by decades, okay?
Yeah.
But yet we continued with those, and now Trump is saying, that's enough. We're not going to be the pocketbook, or I forget what, the
yeah.
phrase that he used. But, and I think he was right about that. He
You're
said,
talking
so-
about NATO now, you're talking
I'm
about
talking
military
about,
expense.
well, the military, he did two things. I mean, he said, you guys got to pay up, especially Germany, because you're the strongest economy in the area, and you're not doing it. Plus the deal that he made with Putin, that what's her name made with Putin about the pipeline for natural gas
Yeah.
to come through, that she's subsidizing the building of it when they could buy liquid natural gas from the United States, since we're producing and we're exporting it. And so I agree with him. He was right about that. And whoops. This
That
thing here
doesn't,
fell off.
yeah, that
So-
doesn't necessarily.
Okay,
mean-
so now tariffs. What happened? What was the he unilaterally, and as president, I didn't realize this until I looked into it. But he can do this as president. He doesn't need Congress for this. He can impose those tariffs. Okay, so he did.
Oh, no, I
He
know
did it
can
as
do
a bargaining
Yeah.
position, and what happened? The EU buckled, and they said, "Okay, we're going to renegotiate things." So you have, bilateral trade negotiations. He didn't like the big ones, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership one. He said didn't want to be part of that. We'll make a deal with China. We'll make a deal with Japan. We'll make a deal a bilateral trade negotiation, which I think
No.
is the best way to go.
Yeah.
Now.
What if
We're
he
doing the
doesn't-
same thing with NAFTA. He's wants to renegotiate NAFTA. Well, now I want a bilateral agreement with Canada, a bilateral agreement with Mexico. I think it's a good way to go. The tariffs are going to have hopefully short-term, negative effects. Soybeans
I
and
know, you
pork and
believe
such
that.
as that. And but I think long-term, it's going to be better.
One
And
of
he
the-
is playing a long-term game.
Well, yeah, one of the problems, he's on a short-term leash because you're not going to be here long-term. We're going to suffer.
We'll see.
We may not suffer the results of this, but down the road, this country will suffer a lot of the problems that he's creating. But anyway, the thing about NAFTA not NAFTA, but NATO that bothers me, there was an agreement that was struck several years ago. Yeah, I think it was under Obama, when Obama was here. And it was an agreement that by 2024, all of those various members of that group would be at that 2% level. Great Britain is at the 2% level now, but
Poland, and that's about it.
Poland, yeah, Germany, France, I forget who else.
I think
but
Italy was.
Italy might be
Greece.
close.
No, Greece.
Yeah, Greece was close. But the point is, yeah, they had an agreement that said, okay, within the next 5 years or 6 years, we'll be at that 2% level.
But they weren't.
They didn't even give him a chance.
Oh, they've had it.
He imposed this. The deal ran out in 2024.
Trump himself. Okay,
Yeah,
right.
Trump
Yeah.
jumped in the middle of it like, I'm the hero, I'm going to change this.
We didn't enforce it. Whoops. Sorry about that.
Hello?
Nice talking to you. Come back when you can't stay so long.
Anyway, so as far as the other stuff with the tariffs, I know the largest, I like this one, the largest manufacturer of nails in the United States, in an area where Trump won the election by St. Louis, Missouri area, he had like a 30% plurality there. And the largest manufacturer of nails in the United States just laid off 65 people. Their business is in the toilet because the price of steel.
Yeah.
All of their vendors are no longer buying from them because
Yeah.
they can buy it cheaper from Panama or somewhere else.
Uh-huh.
So that doesn't hurt him. It's the same thing he's doing with the motorcycle company. Actually, you'll like this. He was in one of his rallies. I think it was South Carolina, somewhere, a few weeks ago. And he was telling people how wonderful it was going to be with these new tariffs that Mercedes and BMW would no longer have this free pass-through.
In Volkswagen.
The three biggest manufacturing states, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina,
have those plants in their
big
states.
factories.
Right.
The people were sitting there, and their eyes were glazed over. They can't believe it. Talk to people at the motorcycle factories, and now they're going to be building. Now he's threatening them. Oh, we'll get them from somebody else. The man is not rational. But anyway,
All right.
I think we belabor that.
In New Mexico last week,
Huh.
5 jihadis,
Ugh.
5 Muslims were 3 women and 2 men had, I don't know how many kids, young people, at a training camp in the middle of looked like the desert of New Mexico, surrounded by
New
old
Mexico,
tires. New Mexico, the state of New Mexico. Okay, so they were raided, and it was discovered that they're training these young people to shoot up schools in the United States. They find the body of one of the sons of one of the 2 guys buried there.
The body?
The body. He had died evidently of some kind of, he
They
had
were
epilepsy,
practicing
but
on him. Yeah.
no, they didn't shoot him. It doesn't look like they murdered him, but he died. They weren't treating him correctly. And it was
Yeah.
child abuse. That was the example of child. So they were arrested on child abuse charges. Mainstream media ignored that they were all Muslims, and all of them the women were wearing hijabs, and one of the guy's fathers was involved in the September 11th attacks. He was an unindicted co-conspirator in the September 11th attack. Clearly,
Yeah.
they are
Not
all
a good crowd.
jihadis.
Yeah.
All right, they're looking to make war against the United States. That was ignored. That aspect of it was ignored. So federal officials, I assume the FBI or ATF, went to the site. State of New Mexico State Police went, and local police. Then they said they got done. They were arrested. Yesterday, a Democrat judge from San Francisco relocated to Mexico, let them off with no bail. They could just sign themselves
What
right
have
out
they
of
done
jail.
wrong? What have they done illegally? That's, I guess,
Later, the owner of the site.
what were they charged with?
I'm getting to that.
Okay, go ahead.
He found weapons on the site after these 3 agencies had already searched it. Then he finds weapons and ammunition on the site. The kids were being trained to shoot and reload
Yeah.
and shoot and reload and so forth. Clearly, they're a danger to the prosecutor said they're jihadis, they're radical Muslims. The judge says, oh, well, you're discriminating against them because of their religion and because they're black. And it looked like they were.
So they have a claim for lawsuit now. They can sue.
The point is, they're walking the streets, and mainstream media covered up that they were Muslims. And finally it got out, and they had to report that they were Muslims. But then they were being discriminated against, so that's one thing. Next is, yesterday in London, a Muslim immigrant, recent so-called refugee, mowed down bicyclists in London. The day before that, in 3 places in Sweden, a coordinated attack of arson. 100 cars burned, several buildings burned, all simultaneously, by no arrests. No arrests. They were clearly in Muslim neighborhoods, no-go zones that didn't used to exist. Now they're acknowledging they exist. The same day, in France, Muslim refugee stabs 4 people at a small town. We don't know the motives. We may never know what motivated these people to do these things.
I never see this.
Of course you don't. You know you don't,
Fox.
because you
Fox.
pay attention to mainstream media.
Well, at least you call it mainstream media.
Yes.
At least you call it that, because what this president of yours is doing, he doesn't even call it Main Street anymore. He says it's phony news. It's not real news. The enemy of the people. Are you saying that this Main Street media are they the enemy of the people? Are you at that level yet?
I'm not going there yet.
Okay,
Gino.
good. Because
What I'm doing
you're a
is,
writer.
I'm saying that if it's a minority, if it's a Muslim that does it,
Absolutely.
in Minneapolis, for example, where there are several attacks by Muslims, or there are rapes by Muslims, they won't say that. Or if it's by illegal immigrants, they won't say that this is an illegal immigrant. They'll say it's a Minneapolis man. It is a Portland, Maine man. It is a... That's what they say. They don't identify the groups, because that would play into conservative hands, especially Trump's hands, where he says we need to control immigration from these countries because they're a danger of jihadis. So when we have the danger of jihadis, when they're doing things like training kids to shoot up schools, stabbing people, raping people, burning cars, mowing down citizens with a car, then these are jihadis. These are Muslim jihadis, or illegal immigrants killing, rapes and killing people all over the United States. Those are ignored.
Tom,
they're played down.
That's why we have a legal system. If we have no faith in anything about our legal system, if we have no longer any faith in our FBI, our Justice Department,
we don't.
our police forces, all these negative stories about how dangerous our own people are, the state police, federal police, if we keep hearing stories like that coming from the man who they say is president, and he keeps doing this for another 6 years, there'll be no doubt there'll be no law in this country whatsoever, because they're destroying it day by day, piece by piece. You want judges who have been told by their president that, you can't judge, you're a Mexican. That's the kind of people you want running this country. That's what's going to happen, and that's what you don't like. You don't like the fact these people are walking because they're getting these judges to read the law and say, gee, we really can't hold you. We don't have the right to hold you. He didn't have the right to do what he did in Mexico with these kids that come across the border who were looking for sanctuary. I mean, really, you got 500 kids that are never going back to their parents now. I mean, doesn't that matter to anybody? This is the kind of law and order we've got because of this guy, this redheaded goofball, who you think is the president. He's working. And I imagine there'll be a few cards and letters that come in over that one. But here's the thing. Let's talk. Can we talk a little bit about
Let's talk about media.
I want to talk about jurisprudence. I want to talk about what's going on with Manafort and all these other people.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you have something?
Make your case.
Do you have something hot off?
I was going to bring something. Go
ahead.
The recently hired editorialist from the New York Times, Sarah Jeong.
Jeong.
Have you heard about her?
No.
Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, you had.
Is that a Chinese person?
People that have been fired or barred from Facebook, or Roseanne, who lost her TV show for a tweet about Valerie Jarrett and comparing it to Planet of the Apes and something like that, right? Okay, well, you got this woman, Sarah Jeong. She was hired by the New York Times. Then somebody looked into her tweet history, her
Oh,
history
yes,
of
I
tweets.
did. He's got some
And
bad
she said
tweets.
things like, dumbass effing white people, they should all go extinct soon. We should cancel white people. Are white people genetically predisposed to burn faster in the sun, thus logically only being fit to live underground like groveling goblins? I could go on, okay, but you get the feel.
She didn't
Clearly,
like Americans.
this woman
Didn't like white
is,
people.
especially white men, okay?
Yeah.
So clearly this woman is a racist.
She sounds like it.
But according to the New York Times standards, nobody can be racist except white people.
Oh,
It's
come
not
on.
possible for other people to be racist against white people, even in the face of pretty explicitly racist tweets
I would
that
say
just
those are a little
quoted
bit on the edge.
verbatim.
They're
I
on
would
the
say
edge.
they're on the edge.
yeah.
So now, what should the New York Times do? Should they continue with their plan to hire this
Now, what
woman
was
on
she
the
gonna
staff?
do? What was she
That
gonna
is
do?
exactly what they did.
They
She
hired
is
her.
going to be editing editorials for the New York Times. It fits right in with
No,
the
I
New
think-
York
no,
Times
but-
editorial standards, if you ask me. So the New York Times defends her.
Well, that's wrong. They should.
Yeah, I would say so.
If that's what she's doing, if that's what she's done. Look, I was accused of being racist because I did say someone was an Oriental. I didn't know that Oriental was a dirty word anymore.
It isn't.
See, well, when I was living, I've been living under a rock in Jackson, and I didn't realize I'm sitting in the game playing cards, and I said, you know, that dealer over there, the Oriental guy. Oh, boy. Whistles blew, fire alarms went off. I didn't know, because I really don't know when I look at someone from Laos or
It isn't.
Cambodia.
It
Thailand.
isn't a bad word. No, only
Why
because
did they say it was?
the New York Times decides these
I don't
groups,
think
they
they
set
should-
themselves up as arbiters of what is racist and what is not. And I don't happen to go by their judgment for reasons like I just mentioned.
They
I have
shouldn't-
my own
They
judgment.
shouldn't
I have my
hire
own
them,
standards.
okay? If you're
and
not
that's
going to
how I
hire
go.
people, if you're going to fire people because someone says they hit their wife, or fire someone because they say, oh, he grabbed her by the whatever, or you're going to fire people for all these other reasons, you can't hire someone who's an obvious racist. That's just not right.
Well, the New York Times
And if
did.
they do it, then they're wrong, and they should
Okay.
be told they're wrong.
All right, we
so
agree.
I agree with that. But getting back to
Okay.
the trials that are going on.
All right, go ahead.
Trials of Donald Trump. It has been really...
You mean his former
his
Manafort?
Manafort's on trial, and they rested yesterday, and they're going to do their closing arguments today. Unless you got a real idiot on the jury, like the O.J. Simpson jury, you should probably get him convicted. I would say if you get 48 pages of information where he signed for bad loans, and I would say at least he's avoiding taxes. You get Stone, this crazy man, he's another nut. He's been a Trump friend for 1,000 years. He's probably going to be indicted next, and this guy will sing like a canary in heat. The guy who's my click to pick, you know who it is, believe it or not?
Click to
Gates the nutbag, okay? The guy who was Manafort's second in command.
He's been their witness in the
Right,
trial.
he did a
Yeah.
lousy job, they
Yeah.
ran over him.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was involved with Manafort since 2010 or
They're
something.
both doing illegal stuff.
Both doing illegal stuff. He actually stole money from Manafort. He stole hundreds. He didn't remember how much. It was hundreds of. These people, you can't
Pretty
make
pathetic.
this. You can't make this stuff up.
And he's
So-
the star witness, right?
and he was on Trump's campaign committee before, then with Manafort. Then he was there for 6 months after the
Gates
results.
was.
Gates. Is it Gates?
He-
Gage.
After the
Is it
election,
Gage
he
or
was
Gage?
there for 6
Yeah,
months
Gage,
in the Trump
Yeah, he's in that
administration.
Now he got.
He was an administration
Yeah.
figure?
Yeah, he was there.
I didn't know that.
Now you got Pruitt, who had every charge thrown at him.
Pruitt.
Pruitt, the guy who was Secretary of EPA or something.
Oh, now you're jumping
Yeah.
away from the trial.
I'm just
Okay.
using the people that he's brought in.
Well, let's stick, I
let
thought
me
you were going
just
to stick, are you done with the trial part of
Yeah,
it?
Wilbur Smith, he's going down big time.
And now you're into the cabinet.
Now
All
you
right.
get Collins, the guy who recommended Trump back in the day when they were at the convention. The guy from New York,
Oh, a congressman.
yeah, congressman, another
Okay.
good guy.
Now you're into this,
You got
the
Noons,
legislature.
High Noons, who is going down so big in this whole deal. The rep.
I don't think, I think you, I
But
don't
I gotta wait for-
have,
I
I don't
gotta-
disagree with anything you
I
said, but
gotta-
until Nunes. Nunes
Yeah, he's your guy.
is a clear,
Yeah, he's a
is
clear
clean.
winner.
He's clean.
Yeah.
And I think he is a hero
Yeah, he's a
in
hero.
my mind.
Here's the point. we got a blue wave coming. You know, I know you'd probably agree it's going to be somewhat of a blue wave.
I don't.
Unless, as they found out over the weekend, some little kid, 11 years old, hacked
Two of them, yeah.
They hacked some voting thing or something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even the Russians, if an 11-year-old kid can do it, I'm sure the Russians can do it. So I think that we got something
Let's
coming.
go to paper ballots.
God only, I know. Well, you remember what the guy who,
I don't need to know right away who won. I can wait till the next morning.
have a week-long election. Why does it have to be Tuesdays, the second Tuesday? I mean, this is crazy shit. Oh, pardon the expression, guys. This is crazy stuff. I mean, you can have an election that runs a whole week. Oregon, it's all handled by mail. They don't do anything.
I remember.
You want to do number two?
I remember listening to you talk. I happen to have this in front of me. Academics, like Sarah Jeong is a graduate of Harvard Law School, by the way, and she makes these kinds of tweets.
Doesn't
But this
mean
is the
anything
kind of
anymore,
stuff they
yeah.
learn, you see,
Yeah.
and not just at Harvard Law School, but in just about every campus in the
Yeah.
United States, private and
liberal.
public, they learn that white people are bad, that you need to renounce your white privilege, and that all whites are racist inherently, they're unconscious racism, systemic racism, gender inequality, all this crazy, crazy stuff. And so it's really no wonder that we get these kinds of people. You know, it used to be something to brag about when you graduated from Harvard Law School.
Yeah.
All right? I would say now it doesn't really speak to your intelligence or to your achievement or anything like that
Yeah.
anymore.
I mean,
And so that I'm setting up for something
Go ahead.
that William F. Buckley said 50 years ago about such things. He said, I would rather entrust the government of the United States to the first 400 people listed in the Boston telephone directory than to the faculty at Harvard University. Well, if it was that bad when he said it in 50 years ago,
1960.
it is essentially 10 times, 100 times worse now. That's all. So let's go to number
Well, then
two.
you've also got, you got the Christian College here in New Jersey, run by Jerry Falwell. That's another academic giant.
All right. For the 2018 midterm general elections, do you believe Republican candidates would be wise to embrace Trump or distance themselves from him?
You understand? I think if you're in North Dakota, South Dakota, or some state like that with no people and plenty of cattle, I would say you can probably use Trump as your
2 minutes left.
helper.
Okay.
But if you're somewhere in a close to blue state or pink state where it's going blue, I would say stay as far away from him as you can because he's
I was going to say
he's
something
cancer.
like that.
Yeah.
It would depend on the congressional
Depends on
district.
exactly where you are.
Yeah, and the same thing happened with Obama. And sometimes they wanted Obama to campaign from some places
Yeah,
they
and
didn't.
keep him out of
you know,
certain
it's,
areas.
It's just common sense kind of stuff.
So anyway,
All right. So
Now,
we have this. We got
I'm
about
just
a
wondering
minute.
if all the people are confused because
We got a minute left.
we've been substituting. We can't find any conservatives to come in to give Tom a break, even though
Tom doesn't want a break.
most of America would probably wish he'd take a break. But the thing is, we got him here, and he's here. And I've been here almost 10 years, and it's again to the point where I have a lot on my plate. As a matter of fact, we got a football season coming up, and there's a great show we have about the Patriots every week. And Bill and I and a young kid, Dave, do the show. But I must admit, I don't miss talking about Trump because he's on my mind constantly. I go to bed praying to God that we will, be all right the next day.
Well, I'm afraid you're gonna. It's very likely that if the election were held tomorrow, he would be re-elected.
I can't see how. Not unless Russia really gets in
I don't
there.
see anyone going
How?
to beat him.
Anybody will beat him. He's 37% in the polls.
That's what they thought so in 2016,
Yeah,
didn't
but
they, Gino?
the
And the
independents-
polls were wrong, weren't
The
they?
independents didn't know what a crazy man he was. You think you're going to get most middle-aged, independent white woman to come out and vote for
The
him?
more Democrats plot against him to try and bring him down with phony Russia investigations, the more his support solidifies.
A quick question before we go. Would you agree that if Mueller comes back and he's got this whole lineup,
You keep
and
saying
he's
that.
and he's as guilty, say, as Manafort, You see the numbers.
Show
of
me the evidence.
If he does and he shows you, will you believe it? Oh,
Gino,
doubting Thomas.
I will go where the evidence points.
That's why doubting
I haven't
Thomas was doubting
seen
Thomas.
any evidence.
Remember what doubting Thomas said? Unless I can put my finger in the hole
Well,
in his
that's evidence,
side.
isn't it?
Well, folks, thank you very much. Hope to see you in a few weeks, maybe a month or so. And
2 weeks.
Tom will
it's
be back
Mark
in 2
Garang
weeks with
gonna
Mark
be in
Garang
your-
at
in
10.
that seat, and we will see you then, folks.
Thank you, folks.